What if the animal everyone jokes about as lazy is actually doing something smarter than most people realize? You see a capybara sitting still, half in the water, staring into nothing, and it looks like there's absolutely nothing going on. No urgency, no reaction, no real thought. But that's the mistake. Because some of what looks like emptiness in a capybara is actually control. It's adaptation. It's a body and mind built for a world that rewards calm far more than speed. And once you see that, you can't really unsee it. You've seen the clip. A capybara is sitting there while everything around it feels loud, messy, or completely absurd, and it barely reacts at all. No panic, no hurry, no visible concern. And the first thought most people have is obvious. There can't be much going on in that head. If it barely moves, it must barely be thinking. That's the mistake. Here's the truth. In the wild, reacting to everything is not always intelligence. A lot of the time, it's risk. Sudden movement draws attention. Wasted energy adds up. And an animal that stays calm long enough to watch before it acts is not checked out. It's controlled. That stillness people laugh at can be doing several things at once. It can be observing the environment. It can be conserving energy. It can be avoiding unnecessary exposure. And that matters more than most people realize, because humans are incredibly biased when we judge awareness. We trust speed. We trust visible reaction. We trust intensity. If something moves fast, looks alert, or responds dramatically, we assume there is intelligence there. If something stays quiet and holds still, we call it blank. But capybaras were never built to perform awareness in a way your brain instantly rewards. They were built for a world where calm can keep you safer than panic, and where doing less on the outside does not mean sensing less on the inside. So no, that capybara is not empty. It is not doing nothing. It's just not wasting energy trying to prove to you that it's present. And that same logic shows up even more clearly when you look at where capybaras spend so much of their time. Picture the capybara everyone shares online. Half submerged in water, eyes barely open, face completely unreadable, looking like it has no deadlines, no stress, and honestly no opinion about anything. And the internet loves that image. It gets called peaceful, lazy, zen, totally unbothered, like this animal has somehow opted out of life and chosen permanent bath mode. But that's not really what's happening. Here's the part most people miss. For a capybara, water is not just comfort, it's function. It helps cool the body, it offers protection, it creates an easy escape route. It gives the animal a place where it can regulate, settle, and stay safe without wasting energy. So, when you see a capybara sitting in water and doing almost nothing, you're probably not looking at an animal checking out. You're looking at an animal moving into one of the few places where its body works exactly the way it was built to. That's the difference. From a human point of view, sitting there like that looks passive. It looks like giving up. It looks like the visual definition of doing the bare minimum. But from a capybara's point of view, that water is not some luxury retreat. It's an extension of safety. It's part of the environment that makes calm possible. And this is where it gets interesting. What people often label as laziness may actually be the moment the animal feels most regulated, most protected, and most at home in its own body. Not because it is leaving the world, but because it is stepping into the version of the world that fits it best. What looks like laziness may actually be the moment the animal feels most like itself. And once you understand that, their slow pace starts to make sense too. Be honest. If an animal moves slowly, reacts slowly, and spends long stretches doing very little, what do you assume? Most people assume the same thing, that it's dull, sleepy, maybe even a little empty. Like there just isn't much happening in there. And when people look at a capybara, that assumption shows up fast. But here's the mistake. A lot of animals were never built to impress your nervous system. They were built to survive their own. That is a completely different standard. Humans are deeply biased toward urgency. Fast movement looks smart to us. Quick reactions look alert. Constant activity looks alive. So when an animal doesn't perform that rhythm, we read the absence of urgency as the absence of awareness. But that is not what you're looking at with a capybara. You're looking at an animal built for energy economy, heat management, and risk reduction. You're looking at a body that makes more sense in a slower ecological rhythm than in the one your brain treats as normal. So their pace is not some sign that the system is failing. Their pace is part of the system working. And that changes the whole picture, because once you stop asking why they aren't faster, you start noticing how much their slowness is actually doing. It helps them avoid wasting energy. It helps them stay regulated. It helps them move through their environment without turning every moment into strain. Humans live by urgency. Capybaras live by regulation. That's why they feel so strange to us sometimes. They don't perform pressure the way we do, so we mistake them for lacking depth. But slow is not broken. Slow can be efficient. Slow can be a form of fit. But if they were truly detached, one thing wouldn't make sense at all: how much they depend on the group. Picture a capybara sitting quietly in a group. Other animals are nearby. Nothing dramatic is happening, no big reaction, no obvious display. And somehow, even surrounded by others, it can still look emotionally miles away. That's why so many people read capybaras as detached, present but not really connected, calm but not really involved, like they're just there. But that reading falls apart the moment you look a little closer. Quiet presence is not the same as social absence, and with capybaras, that difference matters. They are group animals. A lot of what makes their behavior work only makes sense inside stable company. Safety makes more sense in numbers. Movement makes more sense when it's coordinated. Rest makes more sense when familiarity lowers the cost of vigilance. Even their calm starts to look different when you realize it isn't isolation. It's trust in a shared environment. That's the part people miss. Humans are very good at recognizing loud bonding. We notice excitement, constant interaction, dramatic affection, visible reassurance. If connection doesn't look expressive, we often fail to register it at all. So when capybaras bond in a quieter way, by staying close, moving together, settling near each other, and relying on stable social structure, people mistake that for indifference. But it isn't indifference. It's a different style of closeness. And honestly, that makes them more interesting, not less. Because now the capybara stops being just a funny face and a strange pose and starts becoming something warmer than that. An animal whose relationships are real, just not theatrical. Not all connection announces itself. And if this is changing the way you see capybaras, like and subscribe, because a lot of people are still laughing at behavior they've never really learned to read. Think about the kind of world humans create without even noticing it. Loud spaces, sudden movement, constant stimulation. Too many sounds layered on top of each other. Too much happening at once. Now imagine living inside that kind of world when your body was never built for that pace in the first place. Not because you hate life, not because you're weak, just because everything around you moves faster than your nervous system wants it to. That's where capybaras start to make more sense. What looks like withdrawal is not always disinterest. Sometimes it's regulation. Sometimes it's a body trying to stay steady in a world that asks too much of it. Capybaras make sense in stability, in familiar rhythms, in predictable spaces, in low conflict coexistence where not every second feels like a demand. That's not emptiness, that's design. And this is the part people often get wrong. When humans look at a calm animal, they tend to moralize it. They call it boring, passive, uninvolved. But a lot of the time, what they're really watching is a nervous system protecting itself, not checking out, not giving up, just trying not to be overwhelmed. That's why capybaras can feel strangely emotional once you really understand them, because they stop being a joke about doing nothing and start looking like a creature that knows exactly what kind of environment lets it stay whole. Some animals are not made for chaos, and that does not make them lesser. It just means their version of balance looks different from ours. You thought you were looking at an animal that had checked out, but by now, you can probably feel the opposite. The problem was never the capybara. It was the way we were reading it. Over and over, the same mistake kept showing up in different forms. Stillness got misread as emptiness. Water got misread as laziness. Slowness got misread as dullness. Quiet companionship got misread as detachment. And once you notice that pattern, something bigger becomes hard to ignore. People trust visible intensity too much. We are trained to notice movement, speed, expression, urgency, reaction. If something looks busy, we assume something important is happening. If something looks calm, we assume very little is going on. That bias runs so deep that when an animal does not perform awareness in a way our brains instantly recognize, we start calling it blank, or boring, or nothing. But maybe that says more about us than it does about the animal. Because capybaras are not failing to have intelligence. They are just not displaying it in the bright, obvious, high-energy language humans are most comfortable reading. Their version of adaptation is quieter than that, more regulated, more fitted to body, environment, and social rhythm than to spectacle. And that is exactly why so many people miss it. Maybe we only call something nothing when we do not know how to read it. Maybe what looks empty from the outside is sometimes just a kind of coherence we were never taught to notice. So the better question is not why capybaras seem to do so little. The better question is what kind of intelligence hides inside calm, fit, and regulation. Watch for fit, not flash. Regulation, not performance. Because once you stop asking why they do so little, you start seeing how much they've been doing all along.